Good morning everyone and welcome to this meetings of Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Mahalie France-Mear and I'll be chairing today's meeting. Today's meeting will be live streamed on the City's Council website and also so members of the public can observe the meeting without needing to be present. I'm now going to invite members and officers starting from my left to introduce themselves, and please remember to turn off your microphones. Thank you.
Good morning everyone, Elizabeth Gott, Corporate Governance Manager.
Councillor Jane Dawson. Oh, sorry.
Morning everyone, I'm Angela Laycock, Head of Finance for Internal Audit.
Yes. Councillor Dawson.
Councillor Karen Bruce, Ardsley and Robin Hood Ward.
Councillor John Garvani, Horsforth Ward.
Jonathan Foster, Senior Head of Internal Audit, Corporate Governance and Insurance.
Julia Brannan, Internal Audit Manager.
Brenda McLaughlin, Senior Audit Manager.
Kieran Denner, Head of Procurement and Commercial Services.
Morning, Andrew Byram, Interim Chief Digital Information Officer.
Morning, Aaron London, Head of Information Management and Governance.
Good morning, Tim Rollett, Intelligence and Policy.
Good morning everybody, David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer.
Morning, Helen Strotty, Planning and Sustainable Development.
Good morning, Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Good morning everyone, Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Morning, Victoria Bradshaw, Interim Assistant Chief Exec for Finance, Trade and Resources.
Morning Chair, morning members, Gareth Mills, External Audit, Grant Thornton.
Good morning, Paminda Sethi, Grant Thornton, External Audit.
Good morning, Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Good morning everybody, Councillor Chesterfield, Middleton Park Ward.
Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward. Good morning, Nicole Walker, Legal Advisor to the committee today.
Good morning, Debbie Oldham, and I'm the clerk for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to agenda item 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item 1, there are no appeals. Agenda item 2, there's no exempt information. Agenda item 3, there's no formal late items. However, there has been supplementary information in relation to item 12, which is the receipt and approval of audited accounts and external auditors report for 2022-23. This was circulated to members as supplementary information alongside the agenda. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members if there are any declarations of interest? I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, we have received apologies from Councillor Wilson and Councillor Hartbrook. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item agenda 6. It's approving the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 29th of July. Are we okay to approve them? Yep. Okay, brilliant. Matters arising.
Thank you, Chair. So there is a couple of matters arising. One, following the March Committee, the information requested from the Employment Policies Employee Conduct Report. The benchmarking information was distributed to all members on the 30th of July. And then following from the July Committee, the governance arrangement supporting the Core Business Transformation Project, that was distributed on the 22nd of August. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're moving on to item agenda 8, the Annual Assurance Report. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Chair. So this is the annual assurance report with regard to the Council's procurement function. The report provides assurance that the Council's procurement arrangements are up to date, fit for purpose, effectively communicated and routinely complied with. It also provides assurance that the Council's procurement arrangements are being reviewed in order to ensure continuing fitness for purpose in the context of the Procurement Act 2023. It should be noted that after the papers were prepared for release, government announced that the operative date for the new legislation will be pushed back to the 24th of February 2025. That's from the 28th of October 2024 date that's included in the papers. And that's so that government have got the opportunity to review the National Procurement Policy Statement. Don't think it makes any difference to the rest of the paper, though, in terms of the content. Key points are noted in paragraph 4, and then there's a bit more detail in Appendix A. Appendix A, about how the council's procurement process is defined and documented, how they're communicated, assurance that they're effectively embedded and monitored, and also that they're continually reviewed and refined. Just one point I did want to flag up in particular with regard to reviewing and refinement. We've reported a couple of times over the last couple of years about the ongoing review of procurement as part of the Council's core business transformation programme, and we've got a source to contract review that forms part of that. The idea about that is, making sure that we are continuing to have effective procurement support and practices, including training and guidance and efficient systems and processes. A key part of that source to contract review is a review of the Council's contract procedure rules. That's the standing orders relating to contracting. What we're looking to do as part of that is simplify the contract procedure rules, so removing jargon, removing unnecessary repetition, making it more of a timeline, sort of a clear narrative running through how you undertake a procurement and enter into contracts, and that's in response to feedback from various reviews, actually. The other thing that we're doing as part of the CPRs is also making sure that they respond to the requirements of the new Procurement Act as well. So in terms of the recommendations, one of the points is requesting that approach to reviewing the CPRs is endorsed by the committee as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor Dowson? Yeah, could you just go through a little bit about the focus on social value you've got at 1.9?
We can. Is there anything in particular that you wish to pick up with that? We do report annually on social value to scrutiny, Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board as well. But if there's any particular points that you want to pick up on that.
No, I just wanted you to go through social value and what it means for the procurement rules.
So as part of all our procurement activity, we need to consider social value. We do have a requirement that all our contracts look to identify opportunities for social value within those contracts. We focus in particular with regard to the support that we're able to provide as a service from procurement and commercial services. We focus on contracts above £100,000 just because of the amount of resource that we've got available. And we look to ensure that there are specific social value commitments that are made by bidders for each of those contracts. They get evaluated, they get included in contracts as particular requirements that need to be delivered. If the social value commitments aren't delivered, then we do have the ability to then go back and have conversations about potentially why those social value commitments haven't been delivered. Are there alternative social value that could be provided? And in the event that ultimately social value isn't provided as part of that, we can take a financial deduction from the contract that's equivalent to the overall value of those social value commitments that have been made. It's a bit more difficult with contracts under £100,000 in the sense that it does take a lot of time and effort, but it is still a requirement of the council's contract procedure rules that services who are responsible for those contracts do look to try and include social value in those contracts as well. But we do have sort of less information available with regard to commitments that are made at that scale. In terms of the monitoring and reporting that we can do, there's a snapshot that's included in the report that I think is taken, it was the most recent version that I had when I was putting it together. I think that's from July, about the level of social value commitments that have been made in the contracts that we've put through in the, I think it's the last 12 or 18 months. So it is quite significant. And as I say, what we do look to do is continue to monitor the delivery of that, so that you know, we've got that high figure about the commitment, the committed value, but obviously that's no good unless it's actually delivered. In terms of one of the things that we've reported on quite regularly over the last probably 10 years or so is spend with local businesses and SMEs, and I think the spend in the last year has gone up marginally, and it's sort of relatively strong across, I suppose, in comparison when you benchmark to other authorities as well. So we've got the spend with local suppliers and SMEs equated to 67.1% of the total expenditure, which was up just about 3.5% from the previous year.
Yeah, it says at 4.18 there are 124 live contracts with specific additional social value comments, and it's just out of how many?
So out of the totality of the council's contracts, we've got several thousand contracts. These contracts are, as I was saying before, we focus our review and analysis on those contracts that are valued above £100,000. So these 124 contracts as well, they're those value of contracts going back probably over the last 18 months, I think, was when we started to review and include this information. So it's, in terms of the total number of contracts, 124 is a small proportion of the totality of the council's contracts. But in terms of the contracts that we're specifically looking at here, they're only going back about 12 to 18 months, and it's only those that are valued above £100,000. So it's all of those contracts over that time period, or more or less all of those contracts over that time period.
That's fine. So it's just, so you just talk about the larger contracts.
Yes, that's right.
Sorry. And could you just tell me, because I don't know, and forgive me, I probably should know, what is a standstill letter?
So before we award a contract, we need to notify other bidders that we're intending to award the contract. We need to give them specific information about the evaluation that's been undertaken and how they're compared to the winning bidder. We give them a 10-day period under the legislation. It's a statutory period in which they can consider that information. They can ask for more information if they want, but we can't award the contracts in that time period, because they need the opportunity to understand whether they think that there's anything untoward that might have happened in terms of that evaluation.
And just finally, on a note of congratulations, well done. In a world of procurement, to have 15 years with no formal legal challenges is pretty good, so thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations from all of us as well. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I feel we're going to have one of those banners, 15 years and counting, that goes outside the council. Two quick questions, Kieran, if that's okay. One of them I think you touched on there was around social value and SMEs. Is there more that the council can and should be doing to make sure that SMEs don't see social value as an inhibitor to applying for tenders? Often big corporates can take this on quite quickly. It's something that they're set up to do, but SMEs perhaps struggle to anticipate what that might mean in terms of social value when they're bidding through the procurement process. The second is on page 34 and 35. You've got the app for low-value procurements that starts on the 1st of November, and the new procurement strategy work starts the 1st of November, and they should be completed by the middle of next year. Will the delay in legislation impact those dates and dates for delivery?
So if I take the second point first, no, we're going to sort of push ahead with that anyway. I think that's right. I think what will happen in terms of the sort of the CPRs, that's the only thing that we're not going to push ahead with straight away. We are undertaking the review, and assuming that committee's prepared to endorse the proposals that we've included with regard to contract procedure rules, we will engage in detailed consultation sort of immediately following on from this. But I think rather than sort of updating and releasing two separate versions of that document, one just before Christmas and one just after Christmas, that probably doesn't make much sense for us to do that. I think that'd be confusing. But otherwise, everything else we will be proceeding with. With regard to SMEs and making sure that social value isn't an inhibitor, there's a lot of work that we are doing. There's definitely more that we can do. We engage with anchor organisations in the city. We also engage with the voluntary sector quite closely. What we are conscious of, though, is that in terms of the council's documentation as a whole, it is complex, and it's complex not only for organisations outside the council, but it's also complex for officers within the council to use. So we are sort of trying to simplify all that, and I think as part of that process, if we're able to do that, we will make it much more attractive for SMEs, or much more simple for SMEs to bid for council contracts. We also want to be more sort of proactive about engaging with SMEs, about bidder events, but also about just generally helping them to understand the council's processes and how they can bid for contracts. So a bit of a work in progress on that one, but we do recognise the issues, and we are working to try and resolve them.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bruce.
Thanks. It's good that the council, most of its contracts, well, a good more than 60% of contracts are with SMEs, I understand. But I mean, an SME can be a company that employs up to 500 people, as I understand it. So how many of those are small businesses?
So the only information that I've got available right now is what's in the report, but I can take that question away and find you a bit more detail. Are you talking about sort of like, when you say small business, are you referring to sort of micro businesses, those kind of like with 10 or fewer members? Is that what you're interested in?
Yeah, that'd be useful.
Okay, I'll take that away and we can find that information for you. We will be able to get that.
Yeah, thanks. And also, if I can just ask as well about payment for small businesses, because obviously times are hard and small businesses are struggling in some areas. And I just wanted to ask how long the council takes to pay invoices. I mean, what are your terms, and, you know, in reality, how long does it take to pay?
So we need to make payments, I think it's within 28 days of the invoice, and that's a statutory commitment. In terms of the actual percentages, we do report on that. I don't have the information down, but I know that that's a KPI that we report on as a council. So again, we can get that information and provide that to you. We do also have a faster payment scheme that is available to contractors to sign up to, which commits to making payment within 10 days, albeit that there's a small reduction in the amount that's paid, but it does help sort of free up cash flow and get that cash through faster. But we do make the charge because we have to sort of expend specific resource to be able to sort of push that particular invoice through faster. But yeah, we can get that information in terms of how, I think it's the percentage of payments made within that 28-day period. And as I say, I'm pretty sure we do report on that as an authority.
It would be good to have that information, especially, you know, the information about how we charge businesses as well to pay them within 10 days. If we could have that detail. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Linda?
Thank you, Chair. Question for internal audit, I think. Sorry, Jonathan. There's a lot of information in the meaningfully monitor section, which is good to see and gives us some assurance from the department as to what's being done over the massive spend that goes through this area. And I see that in the review and refine section there's a reference to internal audit reporting on a small number of procurements each year, which is good to see. Does internal audit, or has internal audit in the past done a review of what the department monitors to give comfort to yourselves and to us as a committee that the function is operating as a whole in the way that we would expect it to, as well as, or instead, not rather than or instead of, but as well as the individual procurement reviews that you carry out?
The short answer to that one is yes, to be honest. They've been done in previous years and focused on, for example, the monitoring environment around contract and off-contract spend to kind of give that assurance that the approach that the procurement service takes to monitoring where that spend sits and the approach is taken is fit for purpose and is working accordingly. Obviously, lots of things are kind of moving as a target at the moment. Kieran's mentioned in the report around the forthcoming changes to the rules themselves, the new Procurement Act and the source to contract type system that's coming in. So at the moment, I think it would be fair to say that Ryan, who leads on our procurement work from the audit perspective, is still in discussion with Kieran's team around that sort of coverage. But in addition to the specific targeted contract reviews, we do have an eye on that and how that best fits, and that's probably something that we'll look at the right time again moving forward.
Thank you, Jonathan. It just gives, I think it gives the committee assurance overall that that meaningfully monitor section, it gives us that independent view that is being meaningfully monitored in the right way. Thank you.
Yeah, just to be clear, the survey of internal control, Jonathan, that's undertaken by colleagues in your team. So it's that's not a PACS data, that's come from colleagues in audit.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other further questions on this agenda item? No? Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item 9, which is... Sorry, are we happy to agree the recommendations for the report? I always forget that. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item agenda 9, which is the planning, decision-making and enforcement arrangements. Thank you.
Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. I was just going to run through a summary of the report. There's a lot of detail in there, and I just thought it would be helpful just to provide an overarching summary. So the first part of the report deals with the policy and procedures aspects around planning, and this describes the fact that the framework for decision making needs to be plan-led. Consequently, it's important, and we have in place up-to-date and adopted development plans, and this enables us to make decisions in accordance with those plans in terms of individual planning applications. In Leeds, I'm pleased to say that we have full coverage of our adopted plans, as well as a live programme of updating those plans, which are also underway. This section of the report also sets out and describes the process of approval of the Chief Officer's delegation scheme and the sub-delegation scheme associated with this. This also outlines matters in relation to planning enforcement. The delegation scheme is something that we keep under review to ensure that there are clear lines of responsibility arising from changes to legislation. This is necessary, particularly as legislation constantly changes within planning, and therefore we make sure that the delegation scheme is kept up to date. In terms of the next part of the report, this talks about plans panel decision making. and the fact that plans applications are delegated to the Chief Planning Officer, and there are defined categories for applications to be referred to our plans panels. The service receives over 7,000 applications per annum, with officers making 99% of all of those decisions. With regard to planning enforcement, para 8 of the report sets out and describes the process of planning enforcement, which is set within our local enforcement plan. This in turn sets out a range of measures and interventions as part of our approach, which is seeking to be proportionate in terms of planning enforcement matters. In terms of democratic oversight, the report provides a comprehensive list of member briefings, panels, boards, information provision, as well as oversight from the Council's corporate leadership team. This process is underpinned also by officer and member training, learning material through officer and member leadership, including case officer meetings, member training associated with adherence to service systems and protocols. In terms of effectively embedding, paras 22 to 31 of the report sets out the commitment of the service to continued improvements. These include the management of third-party comments, consulting access for parish and town councils, public speaking at plans panels, decision-making protocols. This section also talks about the quality of decision-making from the perspective of the numbers of complaints and the numbers of appeals upheld. When compared to the previous reporting period, the numbers of complaints has reduced and the number of appeals upheld have increased. Para 29 of the report also sets out the performance of planning enforcement appeals where the majority of were dismissed at appeal. In terms of meaningfully monitoring, this part of the report describes how meaningful and robust monitoring takes place across the service, and this is set out in para 32. This includes statutory reporting, government monitoring, service reporting, benchmarking, and also the intent to set up something called a Power BI report, where we're getting some support from our colleagues in IDS to pull that together. In terms of the next section of the report, this describes a series of service and process changes which have been necessary within the context of overall planning reforms, budget pressures and resourcing levels across the council. These are listed in table in para 45 of the report. Application numbers have dropped to pre-pandemic levels, but performance management remains challenging because of the nature of the changes to planning reform. For example, the introduction potentially of extensions of times being removed. Planning enforcement remains a key priority for the service and for the city, and this takes a number of strands in terms of formal action, and Leeds takes more action than comparable core cities. Cases remain high, but through the local enforcement plan, the service takes a proportionate and effective approach. A number of actions are taken through the enforcement process in relation to breaches of control, but it should be noted that 35% of cases which are investigated, there is no breach of planning control. I think that's around issues to do with perceptions and the facts around permitted development allowances. In terms of complaints, these are dealt with through the service, and where we have cases reported to the local government ombudsman, where these are upheld and fault is found, then we make necessary changes to our processes and systems within the service. So moving on finally, Chair, to the state of assurance. As set out in the report, I'm satisfied that the arrangements and following a comprehensive review of internal control for development enforcement, that the systems we have in place are up to date, fit for purpose, embedded and complied with. There are, however, a number of opportunities for continued improvement which are also listed in para 47. This includes new protocols relating to the application process, clarity around planning breaches, the use of an app to assist officers with their site visits, the Power BI app which I've mentioned before with the work from IDS, and also communication matters around planning enforcement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councillor.
Yes, on, excuse me, paragraph 43, where it talks about the number of incidents at planned panel meeting, it goes on to say that there'll be some training for, or member training on the new measures. Can you elaborate on when the training will be implemented, please?
Thank you for your question. Yes, that is a matter that we are moving forward. That should be within the next month, the training. It is something that is in hand. We had a discussion at our Plans Panel Chairs meeting last time, and the need for training was highlighted at that meeting, and therefore through colleagues in our government services we are committed and will be planning that training very shortly. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Councillor Dowson?
Yeah, if I can just come in on that particular point, because you're talking about training, but you're also talking about members' behaviour, not their behaviour, but their reaction to behaviours that are towards them at meetings, about security at home, about travel and all sorts of things. I've never sat on plans panel, so I've never experienced it. Could you give us some examples, please, of the sort of behaviour that members need to be trained for?
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. We've had, I think in recent months, a run of very challenging planning applications at one of our panels, and this has led to issues at the panel meetings themselves, with on occasion people calling out from the public gallery, and also people in attendance taking issue with council officers after the meeting and being threatening to council officers as well as members, and it creates quite a hostile environment, particularly when those applications are already very sensitive, and it isn't a behaviour that we can condone, and we're aiming to take a zero tolerance approach to that, hence the actions that we put in place as a matter of priority.
I'm just going to come in on that point. I've been at 2 plans panel meetings where I've witnessed that type of behaviour, and that shouldn't be happening, and especially to officers where they're spoken down to, where a member from the public gallery have come across to officers. Definitely not going to support that, and you know, we will be taking that very seriously for everybody. But yeah, just wanted to reiterate what I saw, but also support all the measures that are going to be taken in place to protection of officers and members.
Just on that point, it isn't limited to this building either. Sometimes those concerns permeate out of this building, particularly with members where they're in the community and they're having to interact with individuals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, depending on that format. So I think how we take that forward matters not just to plans panel members, but matters to every member. And I hope you can take that forward, David, as well. On the enforcement piece, one of the bits that you mentioned in here is around you know, the cases are dropping, and actually many of them, there's no case to be found here. I think my experience has been part of the challenge has been consistency. So how can we ensure that that is communicated to the public and people understand that decision making to try and reduce the workload for you in the future and reduce those figures further?
Helen might want to come in as well, but I think that's a fair point. What we are doing through the service is to try and be consistent in our communications. The local enforcement plan is a key tool, I think, in setting out the overall framework that we work to and what we seek to adhere to in taking proportionate enforcement action. I think one of the challenges we have is that we have a high number of cases routinely planning enforcement. It's a very high number, and they're all investigated. What hasn't helped is when planning legislation changes and we have planning reforms, the permitted development allowances can change, and things that may have required planning consent before sometimes don't require planning consent, and then you may have cases that are historical where works have been taken place a number of years ago, etc., that has to be looked at within the context of current circumstances. But I think one of the at the end of the report, in terms of the statement of assurances, one of the areas of improvement we want to take forward is that communication actually around planning enforcement in terms of breaches and what it means in practice, so that is communicated clearly. And we have some training sessions coming up. There's a member training session coming up on that, but we'll use other channels as well to sort of get the message out there, to make sure that we are being consistent and that people understand. They may not agree sometimes with the action that has been taken, but as long as we're clear and consistent, then they've got the assurance we're doing the best we can in any given circumstance.
Just a quick follow-up, and is there a consistency that's ensured within staff as well? Because obviously the city's broad. We will have some people who are offenders in very specific locations in the city, and some people who are offenders in multiple locations, which might cut across many different officers. So how do we make sure that there's that consistency where there's information communicated to try and, again, reduce the workload, reduce the time that officers are having to spend on this?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. We have two broad enforcement teams, one dealing with points west in the city, one dealing with points east. There's very close collaboration between the team leaders of those two areas, and case officers within the service share experience of cases. There are caseworkers meetings on a regular basis where particular cases are discussed and dealt with, so that there is a consistency across the service and what we do. And where there are particular instances where there are repeat offenders, then there's an experience that we can draw upon for how to deal with those particular issues at any one point in time.
Only closing saying, Chair, my interaction with officers has always been absolutely brilliant, and I've found they've been incredibly diligent, hard-working, and when there has been some behaviour that's completely untoward, they've handled it in a thoroughly professional manner. I just want to make sure that goes on the record as well, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dowson.
Just want to refer to sort of local plans, in specifically local plans as in a Leeds, I've been led to believe a Leeds-wide plan, and I like to call it Objective 10. I'm not quite sure if that's the right code or number, about houses of multiple occupancy. Can you just tell me, do we still have the objective of, or the instruction that houses, that the assumption is to refuse houses of multiple occupancy?
I'd need to refer to the detail of the policy. That there is policy criteria set out in the core strategy. I think it's is it H9, policy H9? We can come back with the detail, Councillor Dowson, but there is specific policy in there that sets out the criteria for HMOs and the criteria associated with it.
If you could, because and I don't want to get parochial, but a lot of the inner city wards in particular that have very large Victorian and Edwardian properties are routinely split, often into sort of flats that have their own bathrooms and kitchens and so on. But some of them are turned into houses of multiple occupancy, and some streets have quite a number of houses of multiple occupancy, which to a certain extent destabilise some of the services around schools, around waste collection, parking and so on. It's my experience, despite this H9, not Objective 10, this H9 instruction, that most of the applications that come through are actually passed through with very little. And I'm just wondering if I'm one of these vexatious complainers that constantly puts complaints in about houses of multiple occupancy. But it would be nice, don't answer now, it would be nice to have some statistics, it would be nice to have some instruction on what Leeds' view is around this instruction that it has in its documentation. Could I just ask, there is room for good quality houses of multiple occupancy. It's not a blanket ban I'm looking for.
Yes, Councillor. I think that the policy tries to set out a criteria, so each of those instances are looked at on their merits, but we can look at the statistics of that and bring something back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chesterfield.
It was just to add to that, that my understanding is that it's an Article 4 directive, direction area, which means that the council can withdraw permitted development rights for HMO in certain circumstances. So there's a number of areas that fall within that area. I believe Holbeck is one area that falls within that guidance, but there is some information on the Leeds Gov website.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Are we all happy with the recommendations with the report and the information that's to follow through afterwards? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item Agenda 10, Internal Audit Report. Angela?
Thank you. This is our regular update report to the committee, and it summarises the work we've undertaken since our last report that we provided to committee in June. It's the first report since we've introduced our more flexible approach to planning, and members will note that it looks different to previous reports, and we've also tried to incorporate some of the feedback we've had from committee. The report outlines the work we've completed during the period and also the work that we have committed to complete in the next period up until our next update report. We've included tables in the report to show the assurance themes that our work covers, along with the links the work has to corporate risks. Any gaps identified in these tables are considered and reviewed as part of our continuous audit planning process. Our recommendation tracking process shows that 90% of the open recommendations are either not due or less than 3 months overdue. For those recommendations that are more than 3 months overdue, we've confirmed that these are all in progress and that the root cause for the delay is a lack of resources within the service to fully complete the associated actions. We continue to receive positive feedback from our CSQ process, with all respondents either strongly agreeing or agreeing to the questions that the 3 questions that they're asked. We've included our quality assurance improvement programme. Within there's an action to undertake a self-assessment against the new standards to ensure that we're compliant. We're still waiting for those standards to come out for consultation. Once they are, we will do that self-assessment, but in the meantime, we've undertaken a SWOT exercise with the team, and we're currently finalising and agreeing the action plan for that. And we will include any relevant actions from that in future update reports. Appendix C is the monitoring of urgent decisions. That shows that we're meeting our key performance indicators in relation to those. 3 decisions were taken under the urgency provisions, and in all 3 cases, they have been treated in accordance with the relevant procedure rule.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? I'm looking at you. No questions? Okay, are we... Oh, sorry. Linda?
Thank you. I do have 4 questions actually. Do you want me to do them one at a time, or do you want me to reel them all off? How would you prefer? All of them? Okay. Bear with me. Page 82, in the table that talks about the audit title and assurances provided, on the Lotherton Hall income management one, I have a question. You mentioned that there are good processes in place, but there are limitations and complications regarding the systems used, creating an inherently complex environment. It might be my interpretation of that, but I wondered whether there's a bit of a conflict in what you're saying there, or is that my misinterpretation? Because you can get good assurance, albeit when a system and procedure is quite complex. But I guess my question, following on from that mini question, is does internal audit consider where things are overly controlled, dare I say that? But you know, there are efficiencies at play here. You know, is it overly complex for the right reasons, or is it overly complex for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense? So that's question 1, or item 1. Then on page 84, this is me just looking for a bit of clarity really around, let me find the bit that I'm looking for. There are a couple of references in the, which section is it? I'll tell you in a sec. There's a couple of references to some. There are some accuracy of some payments and some recommendations to be implemented, and I haven't made a note of which bit it's on. Sorry. I might have to come back to that one, because there's one that talks about some recommendations and some things to be implemented. I couldn't get a feel of the scale on that. I'll come back to the actual one that one was. My third one was on page 92, which is, I want to say thank you, because I like to see where assurance is aligned to risk. That's great. And I suppose it's a point really for the future when we receive the audit plan going forward. If we can see, you know, the risks and the assurance as they're aligned to at the outset, that would be really helpful. But thank you for making a visual for that, you know, showing us that you're doing that already. That's good. And my final question or comment is around the quality assurance and improvement plan. I just wondered whether we could have some due dates, some implementation dates on that end column, because it's good to see that the things are ongoing. I like to see ongoing. I like to see complete, but it would also be very good if we could see when they expect to be completed, and then we, you know, as a committee, we can say great, or what else do we need to do to support you to get you to where you need to be. Is that all right? Thank you. I can repeat any of that if you want me to.
I'll take the easy one first. Yes, we can put some dates on that going forward. That's really easy to. And on the assurance and the risk framework, we will do that. The intention is that will be an ongoing piece of work. So we'll add to it when we put new pieces of work on it. So you'll be able to get that full view for the annual opinion. There's some references in relation to no recourse to public funds. I think there are a small number of recommendations. I think the issue with no recourse to public funds is the sums are quite small, but it is to assist families who are in need. So it's that balance of financial value versus the safeguarding of the children in relation to that. I don't have the actual number off the top of my head, but we can come back with that. And in relation to Lotherton, in that instance, it is due to different systems being used, and it's just because it's different parts of the council. And yes, we do consider whether or not things are overly controlled. In that instance, it is an issue with different systems being used by different parts of the council. But I do know, and Andrew might come in on this, but that we are looking at a rationalisation of applications across the council to try and stop that sort of thing happening. But it's down to a difference between people booking things online through that system versus coming into the establishment and paying over the counter, be that through cash or through card. They're completely different systems, hopefully.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come in on those questions? No, okay. Councillor Dowson.
It's just to say I'm absolutely blown away by the number of grants that and grant schemes we've got, and I must admit, looking at it, it's the first time I've ever seen or heard of the Traffic Signal Obsolescence Grant and Green Light Fund. So there's an awful lot. I'm not familiar with that one. That one bypassed me totally. But there's so many, and it must take an awful long time to actually apply for these. And then you've got the grant reviews. I'm just wondering how much of your time, or the team's time, is taken up in reviewing all these different funds. And is there any way of streamlining it? And wouldn't it be better really if the council just got a lot of money and the council decided for the people of Leeds where it wanted to go, instead of having all these little pots?
We do account for the time for grants within our annual resource allocation. We have pretty much streamlined the process as much as possible. And unfortunately, these require either a head of audit sign off on the grant or Victoria's sign off. She wants to come in. So these aren't things that we can't not do. But the services do a lot of pre-work before it gets to us.
Thank you, Chair. What I would add is that we have been having a lot of discussions with government around amalgamating a number of the grants because of the time taken. These are the ones that internal audit have to give assurance around for me to sign them off. But there are a significant number that don't have that requirement where internal audit have to review them, but the team still have to monitor them, provide the assurance and report back to central government on top of these. So as I said, it's one of the things that we are talking to government about, whether that's something they could do in the spending review, is to bring all those funding sources together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Nope. Are we happy with the recommendations set out in the report? Okay, brilliant, thank you. Going to move on to item agenda 11. It's the mid-year ICO action plan. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This report presents the ICO Audit Action Plan update prior to the ICO returning to review progress in December of this year. And not wishing to repeat the contents of the report, I'd just like to highlight four key points for members. Firstly, the summary progress as at the 13th of September was as follows: that we had completed 22% of the 50 recommendations, 69% are in progress and 9 are still to be started. We're currently showing that 1 action is overdue, but it's literally currently going through its approval process, and we've accounted for potential knock-on effect to other actions. It's appreciated that this isn't, from a statistical perspective, perhaps notable progress. However, this is due to the ICO applying a priority rating up to their recommendations, and many of those priority recommendations required a lot of background work. Furthermore, as the report explains, many of the actions are linked by themes, and for example, the development and sign-off of 1 document will address in the region of 4 to 5 actions. The work is also now split across in the region of 10 staff to varying extents, so we're actually therefore on course to sign off several actions by the end of September. Secondly, we're reporting that following further review, we'll be continuing 4 recommendations into 2025, and we've made the ICO aware of this. I had a meeting with them a couple of weeks ago. These are considered large-scale actions that we just couldn't robustly implement with existing technology and with the scale of Leeds City Council. We'll therefore be progressing these actions beyond the IC action plan, but members will be kept up to date of progress to future annual information governance assurance reports. Thirdly, one thing I just wanted to add is that since the report was submitted, there's been some developments which will affect actions relating to managing personal data breaches. So, as has been shared with members previous meetings, the Information Management and Governance team is on a journey to become more efficient using Microsoft Power Apps. Unfortunately, owing to work surrounding the Council's Public Services Network Certificate, which is the PSN, development of our data breach Power App was paused. We were therefore needed to consider meeting 5 recommendations by alternative means. Fortunately, owing to other work having now completed, we're advised that we should, I'm using the word should, be able to restart our Power App work. However, if we are, it's unlikely the Power App will be fully completed and implemented by the start of December. We do, however, consider the right thing to do is to get the best system for the future, even if it means a further 5 recommendations going slightly over the December review date. And again, we would make the ICO aware of that. Finally, I do wish to assure members that having recently reviewed every single action, and other than the 4 that we're reporting going into 2025, and potentially the 5 relating to the data breach Power App, we're confident we'll deliver the outcomes as per the report, noting that we have November as a contingency month for any outstanding work, so we have given ourselves a good bit of time if anything does go overdue. So to summarise the future steps, we'll be providing an update to the ICO in December, and we need to provide the evidence of the work that we've done to meet the recommendations. They will either and this is what I've discussed with them, they will either sign us off and say they're happy with the progress and note the work that we're going to do going forward, or they might say that they'll come and review us again in a further 6 months' time. We'll then be providing members with what I would hope we could class as an ICO action plan closure report as part of the annual Information Governance Assurance Report in February 2025. And finally, as already mentioned, with regards to the 4 outstanding actions and potentially the 5 in relation to personal data breaches, these will be transferred to our Information Management Work Programme, through which updates will be provided to members into 2026. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Right, there we go. Councillor Dowson.
You know, I thought in a traffic light system there was sort of green, amber and red. I didn't realise there was a turquoise on top of this, which is the urgent category. So I've learnt something else new today. So, I mean, what concerns me is the risk to the council, because you've got a number of and it's mostly around records management, interestingly enough, that are high risk, urgent, but haven't even been started yet. So is there an issue of capacity around doing this urgent work? And then you've got a number of high risk that are not started or are in progress. So again, it's a question around capacity, because I've no doubt that you are working your socks off to try and comply with all of these. So what's the problem?
Where to start? So, in relation to the records management recommendations, so I'm now 2.5, nearly 3 years in at Leeds, and the culture of my team that I inherited was that we are advisory to services. There wasn't a strong corporate directional lead, which has taken firstly a bit of time to try and move away from, move towards. The extent of how we want to improve is quite substantial with technology. We're talking potentially thousands of pounds to get us to where we want to be in relation to automating records management, whereby as soon as information is recorded in a system, behind the scenes the technology will identify the content and apply retention, for example, and it will automatically be deleted, but we need to set all of that up. In absence of, moving to that technological advancement, it relies on services and time to do it manually. So I think the issues have been that we haven't had corporate strategic direction pushing from information management and governance. We acknowledge the work involved to do it manually, and we also acknowledge the large programme of work to advance the technology. So in terms of the 4 that are going into 2025, it was a toss-up between we could have focused on those and risked a lot more actions, or we acknowledge the fact of the work involved and we take the longer project on the basis that what we do achieve is far better than what other local authorities are doing. This is a very challenging area for a lot of local authorities, no doubt about it, and I would say we are approaching it in the typical Leeds fashion of being ambitious.
I don't know if it's good or bad that other coast cities are struggling as much as we are. It would be quite nice, and maybe this isn't something for this committee, but just something from me, because I like to know the technical ins and outs. What comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? There's no point getting more staff to input data if the technical solution isn't there for them to input it into, and so on. So it'd be quite interesting to know if there is a blockage, where that blockage is in getting it done.
I don't know if you would say there was a single blockage. I think you're looking at 3 different things. There's the resource in terms of progressing it from the corporate perspective of the standards that they want to implement. There's then working with the services to manually delete information which we should be deleting, and then at the same time trying to advance the the technology. It's spinning plates. So you could say there is an element of resourcing that is naturally a problem.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robinson?
Thank you. There's a school of thought that eventually every organisation has a data breach of some way, shape or form, and you put all these measures in to try and prevent it, raising the bar, but ultimately it's how you react to that. How is that included in the report as well? So in the worst case scenario, what happens?
In the worst case scenario, we are probably moving into our emergency planning and resilience procedures. Genuinely, we have what we call incidents. We have people make errors. We have incidents, as you say, where anything we do will never get to this point where we have zero incidents. And they're varying degrees. Touch wood, we've not had one of these, the major one, but your major one is emergency planning. You're having to contact thousands of individuals. You're probably saying that your major one is cyber related as well. And it's putting the procedures in place for that. Yes, absolutely, we want to minimise that. You're throwing the kitchen sink at trying to prevent these incidents from happening, but you're also having your business continuity plans and your disaster recovery plans and your response plans, you name it, in place to do that. I feel like I'm not answering your question spot on, and there's that angle I just want to clarify if I'm not really answering your question.
I think if it's okay, Chair, I think noting the progress that's been made, but probably bringing this back again, particularly in light of the ones that are likely to run on a bit further, and then be mindful for us as members of this committee of what that process looks like in and I am saying it's the worst case scenario, it's not the expected scenario, but so that we know that assurance is in place, there's a plan ready, because that's going to look really different, as you've noted, from the nature of the data that's breached as well. Bit depending whether it's personal, whether it's financial, whether it's corporate, that's really different. And I think for us as a committee, that would be helpful to understand a little bit more about.
Yes, I'm happy with that. Just thinking on, you've touched upon it briefly, but how are you going to ensure that the action plan is going to be maintained going forward with the team?
That's absolutely key. Fortunately, I've gone through an IC audit at a previous local authority, and we need to put in place service level spot checks, and we need to put in place auditing, which is part of the recommendations in itself anyway. But from a top level, what we have, although there's improvements to be made, is an information governance framework of how we generally should do things. What we've not done is completed the circle with the assurance framework. So the end result is that we should have an information governance and assurance framework, which takes us around the loop of continuous improvement. So I'm conscious Kate's not here today, but potentially certainly at least the appendices in terms of future information governance assurance reports, they might be slightly different, whereby we will actually share with members the actual assurance assessment and the action plan. So we will come almost yearly with that assessment and the ongoing action plan. So there is an ongoing improvement as well. And part of the recommendation was to review the need for external audit. Now, in relation to that recommendation at the moment, we're acknowledging the financial challenge and the fact that the ICO have relatively recently been in. So we're not jumping to do that again. There's a lot of work involved in getting us to this point. But as part of that yearly review that we'll do, we will consider at certain points, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, to bring in external auditors to ensure that that assurance framework that we are doing is robust.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions from anyone? No? Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to item agenda 12. Oh, sorry. Are we happy with the recommendations? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm going to move on to item agenda 12, and it's the receipt of approved audited accounts. Mary.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presents the final version of the 2022-23 Statement of Accounts for approval by committee and Grant Thornton's audit report on them. So I'll just briefly talk about the accounts themselves and then hand over to Grant Thornton to present their audit report. So the 22-23 Statement of Accounts were originally approved in draft form back in July 2023, and at that stage the previous year's audit, the 21-22 audit, was still ongoing. So in the original 22-23 accounts, the prior year comparators were also drafting status. So the final 22-23 accounts include the final version of the 21-22 audited figures, and they've also been updated for consequential changes to asset valuations. They've also been updated for a small number of asset valuations that arrived too late to be included in the original 22-23 accounts, and also a small number of corrections to asset valuations. Those represent the biggest changes in terms of value from the draft accounts, but they're all affecting non-spendable reserves. There have been two corrections affecting spendable reserves, which are highlighted in the covering report, including increasing revenue reserves by 5.6 million and decreasing usable capital reserves by £6 million. Since the accounts were circulated to committee, we have identified a small number of rounding errors in explanatory tables which have been corrected, and also a small number of typographical errors in some of the narrative statements. But there haven't been any substantial changes in comparison to the version that was circulated, and as at this morning we're not aware of any other issues which would cause us to need to make changes to those statements of accounts. If I could draw members' attention to Appendix 1, which is the management letter which Grant Thornton asked us to provide them before they finally sign off on the audit of the accounts. That gives them assurances about the completeness of our disclosures to them, and also some aspects of compliance with accounting standards. So I can confirm that officers are satisfied that the contents of that letter is correct and that it can be signed on behalf of the council. So members are asked to consider that letter and to authorise the chair to sign both the letter and the statement of accounts on behalf of the council. And with that, I'll hand over to Grant Thornton to present their audit report.
Thanks very much, Mary, and thank you, Chair. So this is our ISA 260 report, Chair, for the 22-23 audit of your accounts. I'll take the report as read. It's quite a detailed, lengthy, quite technical report, but I'll just draw out some of the key messages on the two headline pages, starting with pack page 135. So as Mary said, the 21-22 accounts were signed off in March of this year, and following that, we went straight in as an audit team alongside finance colleagues into the 22-23 accounts audit with those updated 22-23 accounts that were issued in April. I think one of the key messages for me to highlight to members is the increased level of engagement and increased quality in terms of the accompanying working papers during the audit, and the timeliness of responses that we've had from finance colleagues. That's significantly shifted as part of the audit of the 22-23 accounts, and which is one of the reasons why, as Mary says, that we're hoping to conclude the audit within the next week, which would be basically delivering it within a 6-month period, Chair, which is a significant achievement, I think, on both finance colleagues and ourselves. And that improved timeliness and quality of documentation, that needs to be maintained, Chair, because the pressures don't ease in terms of getting the accounts audit back on track here at Leeds. So I know, whilst I'm stepping down after my 5 years as the audit lead on this, my colleague Sarah Ironmonger takes over alongside Paminda and the rest of the team, and we'll be moving straight into the 23-24 accounts audit in October, with a view to concluding that before the national backstop or guillotine, if you like, at the end of February 25. So I think it is worth, just emphasising the improvements that we've seen over the last 6 months on the accounts audit. In terms of areas that are still outstanding, that are bulleted there, obviously this report was drafted towards the beginning of the month. Work has progressed in those areas, Chair. We're virtually there now in terms of completing that work. I think it's important to note that bullet point 2 there, in terms of provisions and contingent liabilities, that piece of work has now been concluded. There's some small non-material changes to the accounts as a result of that discussion with finance and wider colleagues, and some enhanced disclosures and narrative within the accounts, but that's a key piece of audit work that's been concluded. So all those things considered, I do hope to be in a position to issue a clean, unqualified opinion within the next week, Chair, which, as I say, is a really good outcome. Just moving over the page briefly, Chair, the value for money works. Obviously, there's two aspects of our audit work in local authorities. One is the audit of the accounts, the other is the value for money arrangements review. Colleagues may recall that the 22-23 VFM report came to this committee last November, and we did raise two key recommendations in that work around the overall transformational plans and balanced budgets and sustainability of savings requirements on the sort of financial sustainability side, and then a key point around the accounts audit process. As things stand, our 23-24 VFM work is nearing completion. Obviously, I've not been involved in that, but Perminder and other colleagues have. And my understanding is that report's expected to come to the next meeting of this committee. So it's good that the value for money work will be kept up on an annual basis. So the 23-24 VFM report will be coming to this committee in November. So the only final piece of the jigsaw then, Chair, will be the whole of government accounts piece of work, which is a relatively high level piece of work that we need to do on a very small number of authorities that meet the threshold requirement, of which Leeds, given its size, is one. So that we're hoping to conclude as soon as possible within the next month, and that will then fully close off the 22-23 audit. So I'll pause at that point, Chair. Those were just the key messages from the exec summary, if you like, but obviously happy to try and answer any questions you or other members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from any of the members? No? Linda?
Thank you. Firstly, I want to say well done. It's not easy auditing. I've done this. It's not easy auditing accounts that are dare I say old, but that they are, aren't they? And it's not easy to do that. Equally, it's not easy for officers to respond to questions when they've moved on and they're doing new and fresh things. So well done. Great that you've been able to get to this position. I do recognise that you've done all of that in, I think you said 6 months, which is great. I also recognise that the next hurdle that you've got to get over is in an even shorter period of time. And during that time, there's a heck of a lot going on in the council, not least budget setting, new system, ledger coming in, staff changes, priorities, all sorts of stuff. I suppose as a committee, can we be satisfied that you've got the time and the resources to do what needs to be done at an officer level and at the auditor level by the end of February in that backstop date?
So if I maybe kick off on the audit side, but I might hand over to Perminder as well to maybe add some thoughts, because as I say, just to be clear, from an independence point of view, it won't be me that's involved in that, Linda, for 23-24. Having said that, obviously I've been involved very closely with Sarah in terms of handover and in terms of the sort of resourcing that we've got in place between October and February. So there is a sufficient level of audit resource and experienced auditors set up and ready to go on that. But I don't think you can underplay the challenge that it will be on both sides between October and the end of February to get that done. And again, just to be really clear to members, the way that the backstop legislation has been set up, it is a genuine guillotine. So if we're nearly there at the end of February and, you know, can we sign off for the first week of March, that isn't an option. It's either done in full by the end of February or you're left with some sort of qualified backstop opinion. But I do know that, you know, both sides are certainly working towards that aim with resourcing accordingly on both sides to achieve that. Don't know if there's anything you want to add, Perminder.
I think the only other item I think worth adding to what Gareth has said is that I think the improved level of interaction, cooperation, quality of working papers really does need to continue. And I think the point you make around the other pressures on finance officers, it's important to ensure those don't sort of pull them off the external audit process because we've got a very tight timeline, and with Christmas in the middle, a lot of people will be on leave, holidays, which makes it actually a little bit more challenging than it might have been at another time. So I think that level of cooperation and focus needs to continue up until the end of February if we are to deliver.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd just add from the Council's perspective that we are looking at the resources that will need to continue. We're obviously implementing dynamics at the same time, and as Linda pointed out, we are setting the Council's budget in the most challenging financial circumstances, so we are up against it. What we have realised, and we are doing a lessons learned report from this audit, although it has gone significantly better than previous years. I would say that we'll build on that, and project management will be key to make sure that we've got the resources in place when Grant Thornton are asking for the information, etc., and being aware of when that's going to be asked for up front so that we can make sure. But it's going to be challenging. I think this is more challenging than the September backstop hitting February, and we will do everything we can that's in our power to make sure that we can meet that. But obviously we're juggling quite a number of balls, so we just need to make sure we don't drop any of them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria and Grant Thornton. That's good to hear. I think it would be good for us as a committee for us to have early sight if there are any red flags that mean that there is a risk to not hitting that deadline. If I could ask that we have early sight of that as a committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to add as well the fact that when it was initially a proposed backstop date in February and now it's there, one of my concerns, and I know I've shared it with the other members, is the pressures on the team. If there's anything we can do to support you as a team, I know there's been some changes there. Please let us know, and we'll do what we can to put that in place. But also it'd be nice to have some timelines as well to see where things are coming up to February as well. I think Councillor Dawson wants to come in with a question.
Should I tell you what, it's just to back up what the Chair said. When you think of the conversations that we had with Grant Thornton, etc., 2 years ago, with all sorts of things about non-cooperation and late responses and so on, the way this has been turned around has been phenomenal, and it must have taken so much hard work on the team's behalf to actually get that done. To have a backstop and such a harsh backstop of February is really harsh, but it's one we have got to meet. So if we can support you, as the Chair said, and as Linda's asked, with any support we can give you, please let us know.
Just to add to that, I think it's fair to say that the move from the original 23-24 backstop of the end of May, bringing it forward 3 months to the end of February, did come as quite a surprise, certainly on our side of the table, and I think to finance colleagues on the other side of the table. And it is, having gone through all that hard work to get 22-23 done on a very prompt basis, to then be up against an arguably even more challenging deadline, you know, is a real challenge. There is a slight suggestion in the way things are worded that there will be exceptions made to that, but that's mainly in relation to where authorities have got into particular difficulties, either financially or from a governance point of view, whereby there's a public interest in getting an audit complete, even if it's after the end of February, which is not the circumstances here at Leeds. So, you know, we're not anticipating any possible extension to that. I think it will stay at the end of February for this particular audit. But it did come as a bit of a surprise to the market. I think that 3-month earlier deadline, and it's put not just this audit but a number of other audits around the country under quite significant pressures to hit that deadline. And there's a risk in the short term, I think, that the national picture of sign-offs could potentially get worse before it gets better by bringing that deadline forward by 3 months. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, and I'm sure the hat trick will be done by the team, but also I just want to thank everyone in the finance team, but especially for yourself, Gareth, for all your help and support over the last 5 years. It's going to be, you know, we've not seen you at the last meeting, but, you know, going forward, I wish you all the best, and thank you for everything. We do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That's very kind of you, and appreciate it. I mean, it's been a real sort of, despite some of the challenges over those 5 years, it has been, you know, a real privilege to lead an audit at an authority like Leeds. So I'll certainly miss working with colleagues. I've known Victoria for some time. We've worked on audits previously elsewhere. So you know, I wish the council all the very best with your objectives and your ambition. Obviously, the audit's been handed over to well, effectively to my and Paminder's boss in terms of Sarah. So you know, you've got a very experienced audit partner coming in to lead the audit, with obviously Paminda still being at the helm in terms of the senior manager role and the key point of contact for the council. So yeah, certainly miss the audit, and wish you and all of the colleagues all the very best, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Robinson?
Just a brief question. Obviously, our next backstop's February. What's the backstop after that?
It's the following February. For 24-25 audits, it's the end of February 26, and then it gradually comes forward. I think it's the end of January in year 3, and then the end of November of the actual calendar year in years 4 and 5. So the aim is to get things back to being signed off within the calendar year.
Thank you very much. Are we happy with the recommendations set out in the report and to receive the audit report for 22-23? Yes. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on to item agenda 13. Richard?
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out Grant Thornton's approach to the audit of the 23-24 financial accounts, and also their process for assessing the arrangements in the council for securing value for money for the use of resources. Since it's a Grant Thornton report, and far be it for me to steal their thunder, can I pass on to Grant Thornton now? Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. So yes, this is our audit plan for 23-24, and it sets out sort of our planned programme of work. In developing our audit plan, we obviously take account of factors that are not only happening within sort of the national context, which impact on local government, for example, increasing and ongoing cost pressures, increasing demand for services, especially within adults and children's social care, but also on some of the local factors that affect Leeds. For example, increasing demand on DSG, pressures around there. Having said that, the outturn position of 23-24 appears that you will deliver a balanced year-end position after using reserves of 5.2 million from the Merriman House Reserve, and you received a refund from the West Yorkshire Combined Authority of just short of £18 million. In terms of delivering the audit, we've already talked about where we're planning to land. So we're aiming to try and deliver this work once we've completed work on 22-23. So at this stage, we're aiming to kick off work in October of this year, aim to finish our field work by the end of January, which would then leave February for us to complete our completion procedures and any slippage or any loose ends to tie up at that time. If we are able to deliver to that timetable, that will put Leeds back onto a normal timeline for 2024-25, which will be quite an achievement in terms of the last couple of years' audit work. The key headlines in terms of the audit plan are summarised on page 7 of our audit plan. The key significant risks that we've identified: firstly, the management override of controls. This is a risk that all auditors are required to consider. And then the two of the specific ones relating to Leeds are around the closing valuation of land and buildings, and also the net pension fund balance. Both of these balances are very significant in the council's accounts, and therefore we do spend additional time on those particular areas. Materiality, we've determined at this stage to be 28.4 million. We will reassess that when we kick off the work, and that materiality level is based upon the prior year accounts 22-23 and the gross expenditure included within the draft accounts. We've set clearly trivial, which is an amount above which we would report any errors or adjustments to the audit committee at 1.4 million, which is the same as it was last year. In terms of value for money work, our work has well progressed around that area, and hopefully the draft report will be issued to officers later this month. Two key risk areas were identified as part of our planning processes. First one around the financial pressures faced by the council, and particularly around your ability to deliver your services given the financial resources that are available to you. And secondly, again around financial sustainability in terms of the increasing MTFS budget gap with the in-year overspends and low levels of reserves that you have, and whether in the medium term you can sort of maintain the council's balanced budget position. We've already referred to the timeline, so I won't go into that in any further detail, but I'll stop and pause for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? No? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Robinson.
Be rude not to, wouldn't it? Obviously, we're starting in October, and I fully understand why you would be doing that based on what we've just discussed with the previous item. Are there certain things that can be rolled over and started in September to save you time? Because that is a really tight turnaround, that January to February time. And I'm mindful of what you said before around Christmas being in there. And I'm certain it's not Grant Thornton's policy to cancel Christmas. So how can we make sure that we save as much time as possible?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. We have tried to sort of work with colleagues within the finance team. I think because there are only limited numbers of people within finance and only limited resources that we have, we've not really been able to sort of start work earlier at this moment in time. What we're aiming to do is to finish 22-23, close that down, and then all resources will be shifted onto 23-24. I think it's around capacity and availability. Otherwise, we may have done it earlier, but the other challenge we have is that we have also other authorities where audits are still on the go. So it's trying to balance those against what resources we have, and of course availability within the finance team too.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? Okay, are we happy with the recommendations set up in the report and the plan? Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item agenda 14, the annual governance statement.
Thank you, Chair. So councillors will recall that the interim AGS came to the committee in July prior to public deposit. So it's presented again just as a final draft. Just to confirm that there were no comments made by the public from the period of public deposit, but we did receive feedback from our colleagues in Grant Thornton. He requested that their recommendations from their VFM report presented at the November committee were included in the AGS, which has been done. So the annual governance statement is a living document. It is constantly open for addition and amendment up until the date that the accounts have been finalised, which we've just discussed will hopefully be February next year, and that's when the AGS can be signed off. So what we're recommending is that the February committee with the accounts, the AGS will be come for signing with an amendment, an appendix, I can't say that word, I'm really sorry, with an appendix for any significant changes that have been happening to the AGS in that time. So I hope that's okay. Any questions? Happy to take them, thank you.
Any questions from anyone? No? Oh, Linda?
Just a quick one from me, and it's nearly the end of the meeting, I might be getting a bit tired. Page 236, that with the reference to external audit, I accept and understand that the AGS will remain open, if you will, until the accounts are signed off and we're all done and dusted in that respect. But should there be, and this isn't me saying there should, it's just asking a question, should there be any reference in that external audit section to the fact that the accounts are or have been delayed, deferred, late in being signed off? Should there be a reference in there, do you think?
I'm not entirely sure. Oh.
And that's probably because I'm not left.
Sorry, feedback. Yeah, not entirely sure about that, but I can have a look at the regulations and see what should be included and include it in the one going to February if needed. Sorry, Victoria.
I think the only thing I'd say is that the draft accounts were ready, and the audit is as planned. So we've not actually missed any deadlines.
It's mid-December, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think that the assurance is that the accounts weren't late. The draft accounts came here and were approved in the timetable. So I don't know whether it would warrant that, but Gareth might have a different view.
I mean, thanks, Victoria. Just to add, Chair, from me, I mean, what given that this document, I would think would be essentially live until the end of February when the 23-24 accounts are hopefully signed off in full as per the previous item. This document could mention that the 22-23 accounts audit commenced in April and was hopefully signed off end of September, early October, to demonstrate, I suppose, the Council's response to that second bullet in terms of our key finding on the VFM from last November. So there's been a really positive response to that, and therefore the 22-23 accounts audit was completed within a 6-month period. So, you know, that could be reflected in this document before it's formally signed off and agreed at the end of February next year. It would be my view, but obviously, as I said before, 23-24 is not really my audit, but that would be my thoughts, Chair. Thank you.
Personally, I think that would be helpful, not least because as a cold reader of the annual governance statement, knowing what we've read on previous items and it just joins the dots and closes that off, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions? No? Are we happy with the recommendations and the amendments? Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to move on to item agenda 15, which is the recruitment of a second independent member to the committee. With this item agenda, Linda's going to be here as an observer in the room and is unable to contribute towards this agenda item. So thank you very much, Liz.
Thank you, Chair. So as raised in the committee's annual report that was received by the committee in June, the 2022 SIP for Guidance on Audit Committees has recommended as best practice that committees have 2 independent members. So we've taken that information away and conducted some benchmarking, which is in the report that you've been provided with, that shows that Leeds is not an outlier in just having 1 independent member. We've also listed the arrangements that we do have in place to support the committee at point 7 of the report, and we recommend that the committee endorses the next tenure of Linda's position within the committee, but also recognise that the recruitment of a second independent member to the committee is put on hold at the moment for a consideration next year to look at that again. So yeah, any questions? Thank you.
Are there any questions from any of the members?
Thank you. So always awkward when Linda's in the room because Linda's absolutely excellent, and I think it was said in the chamber last week by a number of members as well. So, and I think Linda's term sees all of us out as elected members as well, subject to electoral changes. So might be the only one here in a few years' time. But so absolutely fully endorse Linda being back on. I think actually what having Linda on the committee has shown is that expertise and insight is really, really useful. And I understand the financial position and the reason for putting it on hold. On hold until when would be the question. When do we review it?
So we're going to look at reviewing that position annually as to obviously where the council still stands financially, but also the needs of the committee as well. And so we're hoping that will be an annual review.
I think given what we're hearing this morning, we're in a healthy-ish position. I'm mindful that officers are nodding, so that's good. A healthy-ish position in terms of where we are compared to where we've been previously. So I understand that. I think as long as we make sure we maintain that annual review and that we look at if there is opportunity and somebody is interested in joining us, then we take it up or discuss it and bring it forward as quickly as possible. Because I do think that expertise from people who are not elected members is really, really useful. And I've found it particularly useful as well, Linda, having you on here. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In agreement. Linda is invaluable to the committee. And yes, we will... That'd be the dream. But yeah, if obviously if that changes, we will bring it to the committee's attention as soon as it comes up. But thank you.
Are there any further questions? No. Councillor Chesterfield.
I'll just sort of second what you've just said there. As a relatively new member and a new member on this panel and committee, the input has been fantastic. It's a you know part of my own sort of learning development. I'll take that on board. The comments that you've made and the points that you've raised. So I would second say what you've said there. Thank you.
Councillor Bruce.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Very valuable contribution. Yeah, I know. I just wondered, how do we go about the process of co-opting another member on? Sorry. How do we choose anybody?
So that's sent out for recruitment, and we go through a panel, a remuneration panel, and then we advertise the position really and go through the whole recruitment process of interviewing, and then there'll be an induction for a successful candidate, and it follows that process.
Any further comments or questions? I just want to reiterate massive thank you, Linda, for all your help and support and giving us that objective oversight and fresh set of eyes and everything that you do with what we do here at the with the Corporate Governance Committee. So thank you very much. It's been invaluable. It really has been. So thank you. Are we all in agreement with Linda? I'm sure we are. I need to ask the question. Are we happy with the recommendations? Yeah. Should we go? No, I haven't worked that technology out yet. Please don't. But okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so we're going to move on to item agenda 15, and thank you, Linda. 16, sorry.
Sorry, me again. Promise it's the last one. So just to say to members that there's been no significant changes to the work programme report, and regarding the members' development plan, the Cyber Sentinel was sent out to all members on the 3rd of September, and following up from the offer from Andrew Byram at last committee. Sorry, that's fine. So following Andrew's offer of a session to all members on Leeds' cybersecurity arrangements, that has been included in the members' development programme for winter. You should receive that in January next year, hopefully, but in time for the annual assurance report from IDS. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions regarding the work plan? No? Okay. Are we happy with the recommendations with that? Brilliant. Thank you very much. And that's the end of today's meeting. I just want to say thank you for everyone's contributions today. And Gareth, we wish you all the best again. Next meeting is on the 25th of November at 10:30 a.m. Have a lovely week, everyone. Bye-bye.